As the college football playoff dominates the news cycle, Notre Dame has consistently voiced their frustration with being left out of the playoff. James Franklin has made some noteworthy additions to his coaching staff, and Virginia Tech men's basketball rolls on, trying to capitalize on some early season momentum.
Hello and welcome into the Center of the Arts for 3304 Sports Crossover. With Cody Wagner, I'm Haden Tolbert. Cody, let's talk about the college football playoff and how it's going to start.
Yeah, super interesting. You saw two group of 5 teams get in, which is the first season. We've seen that in this 12-team college football playoff, and I think it's super interesting to talk about. A lot of people frustrated with the fact that both JMU and Tulane get into the college football playoff, but for me, honestly, I don't see how you can be so frustrated given the circumstance that, hey, it was likely to happen. I mean, you go into that ACC championship game, it's going to be about 50-50, somewhere around that, whether Duke or UVA wins, and Duke ends up coming out the ACC champion, and of course they weren't going to get in with where they were, strength of schedule and strength of record-wise.
Yeah, and I think it was a good idea to have 2 group of 5 teams in. You know, Notre Dame, they're not a part of a conference, so they're always going to be the scapegoat in that sense. You know, Alabama, some people might think that if Alabama dropped out of the playoffs, then conference championships wouldn't really be worth it anymore.
Notre Dame missed out on the CFP in a big way. And for more on the Fighting Irish's relationship with the ACC and why that has raised tensions, here's our very own Thomas Howlett.
Whenever the holiday season rolls around, that means college football is hitting its stride, and this year is no different. This past weekend, the college football playoff announced the second ever 12-team playoff field, and as expected, much controversy came along with it. The CFP is no stranger to this state, however, but this time it may have caused actual damage between a school and a conference. The controversy stems from the committee's decision to exclude Notre Dame from the playoff field in favor of Miami and Alabama. So why was Notre Dame left out? Well, the big reason here is that Alabama was the SEC runner-up after losing to Georgia in the championship, so that propelled them in, and then Miami had the head-to-head over Notre Dame, as well as the Fighting Irish not having a conference. So ever since being left out of the field, Notre Dame has declined to play in their bowl game, and they've also shouldered some of the blame on the ACC. In an interview on the Dan Patrick Show, Notre Dame Athletic Director Pete Bevekwa was asked what role the ACC played in Notre Dame's exclusion, to which Bevekwa responded by saying that the conference's actions mystified them. Bevekwa himself was perplexed as to why the conference would attack their biggest business partner. In the interview, Bevekwa made it clear that there's no gripes with any schools in the conference, and he says that permanent damage has been done, but later clarified that the relationship has only been necessarily strained when Dan Patrick asked if they would reevaluate their relationship. The rest of the interview is great as well, and you can check it out on the Dan Patrick Show. So what does this controversy mean for the ACC and Notre Dame? Well, the first thing that it could mean is Notre Dame could look for permanent conference membership. Obviously, the ACC is the front runner in that category, but even the Big Ten makes sense with their historic rivalries and other things like that, especially the TV deal with NBC and Peacock. And now the question is, does Notre Dame schedule tougher opponents or weaker opponents, or do they kind of keep the same tough teams early, then weaker teams through the rest of the schedule? We don't know. And does this hurt the ACC's relations with Notre Dame, as they're the ones being accused of the big factor of leaving them out of the playoff, and kind of an ultimatum and saying, if you don't join us in football, we'll exclude you from other sports? I doubt that happens. It is highly unlikely. But while Notre Dame did have a great season, and as much as it does hurt not to be able to watch some of the fantastic talent they have, there are other teams in the same boat that had arguments to make the field as well. Even with the controversy, the hope is that fans can enjoy the great football around the corner this holiday season.
Well done, Thomas. Haden, there's been a lot of shakeup in this very young offseason for Virginia Tech football-wise, first the hiring of James Franklin, then some big-name recruits announced that they're flipping their commitment to Virginia Tech, along with James Franklin entering, and now a couple of coordinator hires.
Yeah, we've talked about the rankings and how they got in the top 25, as well as James Franklin and all the media they've brought in. But what I like the most is Brent Pry and what he's brought to the table. You know, most time we haven't seen that turnaround with the coaching carousel and a head coach being fired and coming back. So I think that's going to be a really good redemption story for Coach Pry.
Yeah, super interesting story for Brent Pry. Seeing that, you don't see that a ton, right, Hayden, where a head coach is able to come back immediately to Virginia Tech in this circumstance. And I think a big thing for James Franklin and company is getting all the recruits that they did to come from Penn State to Virginia Tech. That's going to serve the Hokies really well.
Yeah, and for more on Brent Pry and more of the offensive coordinators, here's our very own Edric Jones.
The James Franklin era has been off to a strong start, as he's already made an impact in the recruiting realm, boosting VT's recruiting class up 100 spots into the top 25 classes in the nation. After early National Signing Day, Franklin has now shifted his focus into the coaching tree, headlining with a very familiar face coming back to Tech as the new defensive coordinator. This guy right here, good old pal Brent Pry, former head coach for the Hokies for the past 3 years, who had a 16-24 record with them, only won one bowl game in his time here. And 3 months ago, he was getting booed on the Jumbotron, and he got fired as the head coach. Now Coach Pry is back in a more comfortable position as being the defensive coordinator, since that's what he was back in his Penn State days under James Franklin. Pry was under Franklin from 2014 to 2021 when he became the Virginia Tech head coach, and in total has been coaching for 34 years. It's really rare to see a head coach get fired, then rehired back as the coordinator in this short period of time. But given their history and relationship between Franklin and Pry, it totally makes sense for him to come back as the coordinator, especially since he's been mostly widely respected by his players and other coaches. Mr. Franklin has also hired his tight end and co-offensive coordinator, Ty Howell from Penn State. Howell has been at Penn State since the COVID year 2020 and has developed many talents, such as Pat Fryermuth, Theo Johnson, and first-round pick Tyler Warren. This is seen as a risky move since this is his first time being an offensive coordinator, but James has that trust in him to make that impact right away. The one thing I'm really worried about is the quarterback development system, as he's bringing QB coach from Penn State, Danny O'Brien. Danny has spent 5 years under Franklin, and back when he was playing football, he was the ACC Rookie of the Year in 2010 in Maryland under Franklin. O'Brien has coached quarterbacks like Sean Clifford, Tracy McSorley, and five-star prospect Drew Aller. Speaking of Drew Aller, since he was a five-star prospect out of high school, he was hyped up, and he had a great junior year in Penn State. But he didn't really develop heading into his senior year, and it looked pretty stagnant while playing until a season-ending injury in October. With this, hopefully that was just a one-off thing, and things get right here in Blacksburg.
Great stuff, EJ. Well, there's been a lot of football talk as of late, so let's go across the country. Basketball is really getting into the swing of things in Blacksburg.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Let's talk a little bit about this women's basketball team, right? They had a loss to Duke last weekend. That was a tough one for Virginia Tech, but I think the real problem in that game is the turnovers. You look at those numbers, super concerning, over 20 for Virginia Tech. Not that it was a perfect game on Duke's side either, but Hokies got to clean up some of those errors.
Yeah, and it's going to be a key point for Carly Wenzel. I've said this last week when I was hosting, you know, Carly Wenzel is probably one of those key cornerstones in that team, and to get her going is going to be huge for the Hokies. But as well, let's talk about the men's basketball team. What do you think is, you know, your favorite part of how the men's basketball team has been this far?
Yeah, I think for the men's basketball team, it's super interesting to look at how Hokies men's hoops is playing out to this point in the season. The favorite part, I think, is Amani Hansberry. The kid has really shown up. He's played in the post. He's been a real 5 for Virginia Tech, which the Hokies have needed a guy as well that can stretch out the floor. I think that makes him super dangerous for Virginia Tech. How about you, Hayden?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the whole country is talking about Neo Abdalas when he dropped 33 against Providence. But I'm going to agree with you. Amani Hansberry has been a rock down there in the paint when especially Toby Lawal has been out. So it's huge to have a kind of big that's going to be physical like that and get you points and get to the foul line. So that's huge for the Hokies.
Yeah, and not to mention that Jane Schutt has gotten hot recently. Well, to tell you about how Hokies men's hoops are looking this season, we send you on over to our very own Lucas Harris.
The Hokies got their basketball season underway on November 3rd, and they played their 10th game against George Mason on December 6th. It's been a month and some change, so where are the Hokies currently? The Hokies haven't just been playing easy games, with the 75th toughest schedule in all of Division I college basketball, according to KenPom. and head coach Mike Young and co.'s first test was in Uncasville, Connecticut against the Providence Friars in the Hall of Fame tip-off. A game that was back and forth most of any this season for the Hokies, with 14 lead changes, 18 ties, and the highest lead for both teams was only 8. The Hokies were able to pull this one out 107-101 in an overtime game. It was the highest scoring affair for the Hokies this season so far. The story of this game was one man, and that man is Neo Abdallas. Abdallas, who is the second highest recruit in VT basketball history, has been the spark this team has needed. He exploded for a 33-point performance and willed the Hokies to a win in this game. His playmaking and scoring ability has Coach Young saying he's the best player he has ever coached. A 3-game homestand after this against St. Joseph, where they won by 35, Charlotte when they won by 8, and Bryant by 17, were all tune-ups for their biggest challenge yet, the battle for Atlantis. Issues and flaws were revealed in this 3-day grueler of a tournament, and the nice beaches of Bahama weren't able to help the Hokies. Their first contest was a narrow win over Colorado State, 66-64, but even with the win, they lost much more. Toby Lawal went down in this contest with a foot injury, and he hasn't been seen on the court since. Lawal is currently wearing a boot and using a knee scooter currently, and there isn't a timetable on his return. The biggest issue Tech is struggling with is tempo. Colorado State in their next matchup, St. Mary's, ranked 358th and 290th out of 364 teams in tempo, according to KenPom. Virginia Tech in these games were playing 25 seconds of defense and then shooting the ball with a majority of the shot clock left, causing a lot of stress on their defense. St. Mary's were the first team able to knock up the Hokies 77-66 in a poor shooting performance from the Hokies in the first half. A 21.2% clip from the field and a 6.7 clip from the three-point line was not good enough to beat the St. Mary's. VCU was the third and final game in the battle for Atlantis, and for the Hokies, they wanted to get third place in this. An in-state matchup on foreign soil showcased the offensive ability and scoring ability of the Rams, and the Hokies just weren't able to keep up. VCU's 52-point percentage and fell 86-68. It didn't get easier with South Carolina being the draw for the Hokies in the ACC-SEC Challenge. Amani Hansberry came up huge in this game with 22 points and 14 rebounds for a Hokie win by 3 points, 86-83. The final game of this 10-game split was another in-state matchup against an undefeated 9-0 George Mason in Castle Coliseum. This game was the Jaden Shoot show, though, with 6 threes and 3 of them coming in a row at the end of the first half, and the Hokies were able to take this one over the line 73-62. It was a close affair in the first half, but the Hokies offense was able to explode on a run, and they took down an undefeated Patriot squad. Overall, the Hokies have an 8-2 record right now. 4 Quad 2 wins, and their only losses coming to Quad 1 teams give a good positive outlook for the Hokies. 55th in net rankings and 65th in KenPom give the Hokies something to look forward to in Hokie fans. UVA is their first opponent in the ACC, and the Hokies look to get on track come ACC play.
Thanks, Lucas. Hayden, let's get some game and score predictions for men's and women's basketball this weekend. First, starting with the men against Maryland Eastern Shore.
Yeah, I feel like they're still trying to get into the rhythm of what they want to be as a team without Toby Lawal. And this is going to be an easy matchup for them, but knock on wood. But, they want to get back on track and kind of, look forward in what they're going to look like without Toby Lawal, because he's going to be out for a while. So I got the Hokies in this one.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Toby Lawal will be a huge part going forward for Virginia Tech, and that missing him, they might have to figure things out a little bit, right, Hayden? Because going forward, Mike Young said that Virginia Tech, they might be out with Toby for a little while. He said a month, maybe 2 months. He doesn't have an exact timeline as of now, but he said it's going to be a while. So it seems like Virginia Tech, they're going to have to figure out how to play without him. I say they do that in a big way this weekend against the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and I got the Hokies by 20 in that contest. Well, let's talk a little bit about the women's basketball as well. They play ETSU this weekend. What do you got there? Yeah,
like the same with the Hokies. When they get those losses, especially when they had it against BYU, they just kind of, and JMU, of course, they kind of had to have those games where they bounce back, and losing to Duke, I can expect them to at home in Castle Guard, they're going to have a game where they can bounce back and get things going.
Yeah, I think this is a huge game for Virginia Tech, and one that they will probably dominate against ETSU. I think maybe even upwards of 30 Virginia Tech can win. When they're putting points on the board, they can do it in a big way, and I expect that to be the case on Sunday.
Yeah, well, we're getting into basketball season. Football season is coming up. We have, Christmas around the corner. Well, that does it for us today from the Center of the Arts. Our reporters, Edric Jones, Thomas Hallett, and Lucas Harrison. My partner at the desk, Cody Wagner. I'm Haden Tolbert saying so long for now.